Masechet Zevaḥim, Daf Yod Zayin, Tevul Yom Minelan. The Mishnah mentioned a whole list of people that if they do Kabbalah, if they receive the blood, then they are ineligible and the korban will be pasul. Yesterday we mentioned someone who is tameh, a kohen who is tameh will make it pasul. We learned that from this pasuk here in Vayikra 22 that says, make sure to tell Aharon, the Aharon Banav, and they have to keep away from Kodshei Bnei Israel and not make them hol, make them pasul. And the next pasuk says, if anybody is v'tumato alav, if they are tameh. So from here we learn that a kohen who is tameh will make it hol. Okay, so we already know that someone that's totally tameh is going to make it pasul, but now we want to know about a tivul yom, who is partially tahor. He was tameh in the morning, maybe he touched a dead mouse in the morning, he became tameh. He goes to the mikveh at some time during the day. He is like 80% tahor. He's tahor for some things. He still cannot eat terumah or kodashim, but a tivul yom can eat maaser sheni. So you see that he is partially tahor. But if he is a kohen and he does kabbalah or holacha or zirika, the korban will be pasul. What's the source? The Tanya. Rabbi Simai Omer, Remez, Litvul Yom She'im Abad, Chilel, Minayin, Talmud Omar, Kedoshim Hiyu, Velo Yichalelu, Imeno Inyan, Letameh, Tenafik, V'yinazeru, Tenehu Inyan, Litvul Yom. And so in the Baraita, Rabbi Simai says, it's from this pasuk in Vayikra 21. We just saw Vayikra 22, here's Vayikra 21, the beginning of Emor, the laws to the Kohanim. That first day, lenefesh lo yitama, he cannot become tameh. Unless, if it's a regular kohen, he can become tameh to his 6 closest relatives. Shero adds his wife, so 7 closest relatives. That's he can become tameh, and then he cannot do a korban there. And then that's the first 3 pisukim are about becoming tameh for relatives. Pasuk 5 is that he cannot make a bald spot on his head nor shave his beard. And cannot make gashes in his flesh. Here, it sounds like it's across the board. He can never do that. We have another pasuk that talks about it in the context of Yisrael, in the context of mourning. There it says, Banim atem ladonai Elohechem lo yikrechu korcha. And so that's in Sefer Devarim. The Gemara in Makot puts the two together and explains that actually even the prohibition against a kohen is also a kohen in mourning. Anyway, it's prohibited for a kohen to do this to his hair and his head. And then 6 says, Kedoshim hiyu leElohehem velo yichalelu shem Elohehem ki et isha Adonai lechem Elohehem emakribim v'hayu kodesh. So Kohanim are holy and they should not make the sacrifices profane. Don't profane God's name because they are bringing the fire offerings to Hashem. So now we're going to analyze this lo yichalelu. What would make it profane? What would make the korbanot chol if they did what? So the immediate pasuk right before is making gashes on their heads. But right now we're going to attach it not to pasuk 5, but rather to the beginning of the perek that talks about a kohen becoming tameh. So here we go. A hint that Tevul Yom is if he served and did Kabbalah, he will make the korban hol from this pasuk. Now, this pasuk says tameh, and actually it's talking about someone who becomes tameh per relative, so tumat met. So you think it's just someone who's totally tameh. It doesn't say it's talking about a tivul yom. However, we don't need this pasuk to teach us the law of someone who's totally tameh because we already saw yesterday that we learned the law that a kohen who's totally tameh cannot serve from Vayikra 22. And therefore, Vayikra 21 is extra. So we apply, if it's not talking about this matter of someone totally tameh, because that would be redundant, then let's apply it to a related case, which is Tivul Yom. Good, that's a proof. But now we challenge that, because this pasuk in 21, the immediately previous pasuk, is talking about someone who creates a bald spot or destroys his beard illegally. So then that means that a Kohen who makes a bald spot in his head and then serves and does a korban, that korban will be chol. That's what it should be talking about, because that's the immediately previous pasuk. Why do you think it's talking about anything about tum'ah, which are the pasukim even before that? And the answer is Tivul Yom De'im Avad B'mita Minalan. We have a baraita. So we have a source that connects this pasuk, the one that we just read here, this Kedoshim Hiyu, it connects it to a law about terumah. And that law about terumah has to be talking about a Tivul Yom, as we're going to see. So how do we, this halacha reads, a Tivul Yom, that if he served and did a korban, how do you know that he would be liable to mita bidei shamayim? What's the source? And so it says, Gedegamar chilul mitiruma, de pasil bitruma machil avoda, de la pasil bitruma la machil avoda. And it connects the word chilul that is mentioned regarding teruma to the word hilul that is mentioned here. It says here 21:6 and then 22:9. 21:6, that's our pasuk v'lo yechalelu, and then 22:9, it's right here, so we can look at it. V'shamaru et mishmati v'lo yis'u alav chet umetu bo ki yechaleluhu ani Adonai mekadishchem. And so if that pasuk, which is talking about a Tivul Yom who cannot eat terumah, that's the context there. So whoever cannot eat terumah, also if he does avodah, will make it chol. Well, that applies to a Tivul Yom. But someone who is not disqualified from eating terumah, meaning someone that makes a bald spot, gashes himself, a Kohen who does that, although it's not allowed, he is allowed to eat terumah, so it doesn't make him disqualified from terumah. So, and we have a gezerah shavah. Therefore, that person will not make avodah service no good. So, if a Kohen goes ahead and makes himself a bald spot, he may violate his prohibition. But if he goes and serves, it will not make it. It will not make it pasul, just as he is still allowed to eat terumah. So, because we have this gezerah shavah with this very pasuk, and the gezerah shavah does not apply to a Kohen who makes a bald spot, but does apply to a Tivul Yom. Therefore, we see that this pasuk is already known in the oral tradition, that it applies to a Tivul Yom, and therefore that is the source. We already have a source for someone who's totally tameh, and this pasuk is the source for a Tivul Yom. Amar Rabba, lama li de katab lachamana tameh utvul yom umechusar kippurim. Rabba asks, why do we need pesukim to teach me all of these three cases? The Mishnah mentioned all of these three cases, and we already brought proofs for tameh and tivul yom. We will bring a proof for mechusar kippurim later on. But the point is that there are three different derivations and three laws that say someone who's totally tameh, it could be different types of tumah, like a zav, or someone who touched a dead mouse, or tameh lamet. Anyone who's totally tameh, Kohen cannot do Kabbalah. And we just saw another source for Tivul Yom, and we're going to see also a source for Mechusar Kippurim. That would be someone like a zav, who did his waiting period, and he went to the mikveh, and the nighttime already came, so he could eat terumah at that point, but he still has to bring a korban the next day in order to be completely atoned so that he could eat kodashim. So he is lacking atonement because he has to bring his korbanot. Why do we need all three? They're all different stages of tumah. Couldn't we learn one from the other? And the answer is sirichi, and we need all three. If it only said the first category of tameh, that's the most stringent. And it's most stringent in that he is not only is he totally tameh, he also can impart tumah on other people or things, depending on his level of tumah. And therefore, one cannot learn from that Tevul Yom Mechusar Kippurim, who do not impart Tum'ah on others. B'Tevul Yom Mechusar Kippurim la'atemine sheken pasul b'Truma. If we only had Tevul Yom, maybe we could learn Tameh, because that's more stringent than Tevul Yom. So if Tevul Yom is prohibited from doing a korban, certainly a Tameh. But the other one, Mechusar Kippurim, we would not be able to learn from Tevul Yom, because Tevul Yom cannot eat terumah. Therefore, Tevul Yom is more stringent than Mechusar Kippurim. Mechusar Kippurim means the nighttime already came and can eat terumah. So you cannot learn from Tevul Yom, which is more stringent in that he cannot eat terumah, to a case of Mechusar Kippurim that's more lenient. B'Mechusar Kippurim, Tevul Yom la'atemine sheken Mechusar ma'aseh. And if you only had Mechusar Kippurim, you'd think, well, that's the least stringent. So if that person, the Kohen, cannot perform a service and it'll be pasul if he does, then certainly the other ones. However, there is a sense in which Mechusar Kippurim is more stringent, because he's lacking an action. He still has to go bring a korban. Someone who's totally tameh also has to do an action. He has to go to the mikveh. Whereas Tevul Yom has to do no action. He just has to wait till nighttime. He could go to sleep, take a nap, and wake up when it's night, and then he is finished. So he's not Tevul Yom anymore. Then he's totally tahor. He could eat terumah once it gets dark. And so Mechusar Kippurim has a stringency in that he has to do an action, and maybe that's why he cannot go and perform a korban, and Tevul Yom could. Therefore, I need all of them. All right. Mechada la'ateh, teteh chada mitarteh. So far, we only proved that I cannot learn all of them from one case, but maybe I could learn one of them from two cases. In other words, tell me two of them, and then I could learn one from the other two. So let's try it out. Which one could the Torah have left out? La lichtov b'mchusar kippurim v'teteh mehanach malhanach sheken pesulim b'truma. Well, if it left out mechusar kippurim and learn mechusar kippurim from tameh and tevul yom, but you couldn't do that because someone tameh and tevul yom cannot eat terumah, so they're more stringent. You can't learn a stringency from there and apply it to mechusar kippurim, who is allowed to eat terumah. Okay, so leave out Tevul Yom and learn Tevul Yom from the other two. Now, how did we challenge it before when we talked about Tevul Yom? Well, because we said that the other two are missing in action. That's true. Tameh and Mechusar Kippurim still have to do an action, whereas Tevul Yom is more lenient in the sense that he just has to has to wait. He could take a nap. That's true. On the other hand, in the end, the Tum'ah level of a Mechusar Kippurim is weaker, because Mechusar Kippurim can eat terumah. So shouldn't that outweigh the fact that Mechusar Kippurim is Mechusar Ma'aseh, and therefore you should be able to learn. You have Tameh and you have Mechusar Kippurim. It's really from Mechusar Kippurim because his level of Tumah is weaker. It's so weak. Therefore, it should be, and so you should be a good Kal Vachomer if a Mechusar Kippurim who can eat terumah. He's very, very little tumah left for him. He just can't bring a korban. He can't eat a korban. That's all. But it's very weak, and if he brings a korban, it will be pasul, then all the more so Tevul Yom, who cannot even eat terumah. So shouldn't that be an overriding factor? Kasaban mechusar kippurim dezav kezav dameh. Oh, must be that the author of our Mishnah that has all these things, or rather Rabbah, who is explaining our Mishnah and explaining why the Torah requires all these things. So Rabbah, in his explanation, must be assuming the opinion, we're going to see as machloket about this, who says that someone who's mechusar kippurim, because he was a zav, is like a zav. In other words, someone who's a zav, if someone who's a zav comes, he's totally tameh. If he would come and eat a korban, he'd get karet. Okay, very serious. Now, what if he went to the mikveh and he waited till nighttime, but he didn't bring his korban yet on the next day, so he's mechusar kippurim. What if he would eat a korban at that stage? Would he be liable, karet, like a zav? Or would you just say it's prohibited for him to do so, but he wouldn't get a serious punishment? That is the machloket. And if we assume that he does get a serious punishment, so what's interesting, although, yes, it's true, he went to the mikveh and it's nighttime. So he went to the mikveh, he could eat maaseh sheni. And nighttime came, he could eat terumah. Okay, although he can do those things, still, the most serious part of being a zav, that he would get karet if he ate a korban, that remains. Well, in that case, actually, mechusar kippurim is more stringent, because mechusar kippurim, in that sense of a zav, is more stringent than a regular tivul yom. I mean, regular tivul yom who touched a dead mouse. So now he's tivul yom. This guy, he doesn't get karet for eating a korban, and therefore you see that the mechusar kippurim and the total tameh is more stringent than a tivul yom, and that's why we cannot learn tivul yom from the other two. So in order to explain Rava, it must be that he follows this opinion. And in fact, we're going to show now that this is a machloket Tanaim. Rabba can follow one of these two opinions. The Tanya, Serafa onen umechusar kippurim keshera. This is the law regarding a para aduma. Remember, para aduma is not officially a korban. It's not done in the Bet Hamikdash. It's slaughtered and burnt on Har HaZeitim. Now, you do have a kohen involved, and there is a sprinkling of the blood towards the kodesh, but it's sprinkled from all the way outside on Har HaZeitim. It's not brought inside. Okay, so it's not quite a korban, and therefore it does not have all the restrictions that a regular korban has. So here the Baraita teaches that if someone who is in onen or mechusar kippurim burns the para aduma, it's kosher, it's okay. Tanakama says that mechusar kippurim can burn a para aduma. Yosef HaBavli omer onen keshera mechusar kippurim pesula. He says, I agree regarding onen, that's okay, but mechusar kippurim cannot. Now, what's the machloket? What's the essence of their machloket? Ma'ila b'hakami palget. Mor savar mechusar kippurim dezav kezav dameh. Must be that Yosef HaBavli thinks that someone who is lacking kippurim, this guy, he was a zav, but he didn't bring his korban, is like a zav himself, and therefore it's very stringent, and he cannot burn the para aduma. And the other opinion, Tanakama says, Lav kezav dameh. No, he's not like a zav. He's almost tahor. He wouldn't even get a punishment. And so therefore, because he is less stringent than a tivul yom, and a tivul yom could burn the para aduma, someone who was just tameh from a mouse, and then he went to mikveh, he can burn the para aduma. So certainly someone who's mechusar kippurim, he's even better because he waited till nighttime, can burn it. And we don't say that, because he was a zav, he still retains the prohibitions, like the punishments like a zav. We don't say that. So that would be the Tanakama. And Rabbah could say, I follow Yosef HaBavli, who says mechusar kippurim, Zav is more stringent, and that's why you cannot learn Tivul Yom from any of the other two. But Rabbah then would be siding with only one side of a machloket, with Yosef HaBavli, and against Tanakama. So, is that true? It's a bit uncomfortable, because now Rabbah is following only the minority opinion. And we say, La dekula alma kezav dameh. No, in fact, everybody agrees. Tanakama and Yosef HaBavli, they all agree that a zav gets all the punishments of that a mechusar kippurim of a zav gets all the punishments of a zav. V'hacha behakami palged ichtib v'izah tahor mikela shehu tameh limed al tivul yom shekasher bepara. The pasuk regarding para aduma says that someone who is tahor will sprinkle. Now this is redundant because the pasuk right before said ish tahor. So I already know that he has to be tahor. Therefore, the second tahor is saying that actually maybe it's not someone who is totally tahor, because then I would only have to say it once. It means someone who's considered tahor for some things, meaning a tivul yom, who's tahor enough for maaser sheni, although he's not 100% tahor. So tahor means he's actually, in some regards, tameh, and this teaches that a tivul yom can help to prepare the para aduma. Mor savar tuma de kol haTorah kula, or mor savar tuma de hach parasha. Now, when we say over here that the person who prepares para aduma can be a tivul yom, can it be any tivul yom? Tanakama will say yes. It doesn't matter how he became tameh, whether it's the low level of he touched a dead mouse, and so now he's a tivul yom, but then he would just wait till nighttime, he doesn't have to do anything else, or whether it's became tameh because he was a zav, or because he touched a dead body. It doesn't matter. Any type of zav can perform the para aduma. That will be Tanakama, and therefore, if he is mechusar kippurim, so then that's fine. He's even before nightfall, when he was only a tivul yom. Even if he had been a zav and now he became tivul yom, so according to Tanakama, he's okay as a tivul yom. Certainly he's okay if he's mechusar kippurim. However, Yosef HaBavli says, no, look at the context of para aduma. It's talking about someone who is tameh lamet. That's the whole point of para aduma. So we're talking about tuma dahach parasha, and we're talking about someone who was tameh lamet, and he went through the purification process, and now, not totally, he's tivul yom, and he has to wait till nighttime to finish off his purification process. That's a tivul yom who can help prepare the para aduma. Hilkach onenu tivul yom ditmeh desheres tikili atu bekav hachomer mitivul yom demet. So onen and tivul yom, if he became tameh because of a sheretz, he is more lenient than someone who's tameh met. So therefore, you can have a kav hachomer. If someone who went to the mikveh after having been tameh lamet can prepare para aduma, then all the more so someone who went to the mikveh just because he touched a dead mouse certainly can prepare para aduma. Ava mechusar kippurim dezav dechamir sheken tum'ah yos'a ala migufo la. But someone who is still lacking atonement because he had been a zav and he has a stringency. What is the stringency of a zav over tameh lamet? It's that the zav, his source of tumah is from within his own body. He had this disease emission, the zav emission from within his own body, because the tumah came from his own body, unlike someone who's tameh lamet, where the source of tumah was a dead body that he came into contact with. So the source of tumah was from outside him. And therefore, according to Yosef HaBavli, I would not be able to learn a kal vachomer that since someone who had been tameh lamet and now is tivul yom can prepare the para aduma. Therefore, he can also, if he was a zav, that's not a kal vachomer, because a zav has a stringency, and therefore, according to Yosef HaBavli, yes, even though someone who was tameh lamet and now is tivul yom, or someone who is tameh sheretz and now is tivul yom, yes, they can prepare para aduma, but mechusar kippurim of a zav, which is machmir, cannot. So we see, according to this, that everybody agrees that mechusar kippurim of a zav is like a zav, has the stringencies of a zav, and therefore Rabbah's reasoning applies equally according to all the Tanaim, because all the Tanaim say that mechusar kippurim of zav has a stringency above and beyond a tivul yom, who's only a tivul yom from a sheretz, and that's why we cannot learn tivul yom from the other two. That's why the Mishnah has to say all three, and that's why we need Pesukim to teach me all these three categories. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.